Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at something, well, a bit paradoxical in American politics. We're going deep on the Libertarian Party, the LP.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case, isn't it? I mean, here's a party, been around for over half a century. They often say they're the third largest in the U.S., membership-wise, and yet almost zero real electoral power at the national level. It's like they persist, but they just don't win. It's the definition of persistence without political viability, you could say.
Exactly. And you, the listener, have basically asked us to figure this out. How can a party keep going when the whole system seems, well, stacked against it? And what are they actually about that makes them so unwilling to compromise, with the Democrats or the Republicans?
Well, we've got quite a stack of sources here: philosophical texts, historical accounts, electoral data, the whole 9 yards.
Our mission today is to get past that sort of bumper sticker description, fiscally conservative, socially liberal. We need to really understand the LP's core philosophy, this ideological rigidity.
Yeah, we'll look at why they just fundamentally clash with the two big parties, and crucially, why the very structure of American politics almost guarantees they won't win major elections, but also kind of ensures they won't just disappear either.
Okay, let's unpack this journey. And it really starts with a specific moment, a flashpoint that kind of sparked the whole thing. So the Libertarian Party wasn't something that just grew organically, like from local clubs upwards. It was pretty explicitly founded in a moment of intense ideological reaction. December 11th, 1971, Colorado Springs. That's the date. It was a direct response to what was happening politically.
Right. It wasn't gradual. It was a coalition of intellectuals, activists, people who just felt completely politically homeless at that moment. The main organizer behind the committee to form a Libertarian Party was David Nolan.
Nolan, yeah. He's important, isn't he?
Very. Because he wasn't just like a political guy. He was thinking ideologically. He's the one who came up with the Nolan chart later on, the two axes: economic freedom, personal freedom.
Right. To get beyond just left and right.
Exactly. He felt that old spectrum just didn't capture their specific worldview, their vision of liberty.
And this group, it wasn't just random disgruntled people. The sources make it clear this included serious thinkers, John Hospers, an academic philosopher, Murray Rothbard, a huge figure in Austrian economics.
Tony Nathan, too, who became their first VP candidate.
Right. And they all shared this really deep conviction. The sources say they felt both Democrats and Republicans had fundamentally diverged from the libertarian principles of the American founding fathers. It was like a principled breakup.
And the really interesting thing, the trigger. It wasn't what you might expect. You often think a third party breaks off because they hate the other side, right?
Yeah.
But the main catalyst here, the thing that really pushed them over the edge, was what they saw as a massive betrayal by the Republican administration, President Richard Nixon.
This is where it gets fascinating, especially for anyone who thinks the GOP has always been, the party of pure free markets. The event that really lit the fuse was the Nixon shock, August 1971. For these founders, steeped in classical, liberal, and Austrian economic ideas, watching Nixon, it was like watching him implement policies they considered almost, well, socialist.
Absolutely. The first big thing was Nixon imposing wage and price controls. Just think about that. The government directly telling businesses and workers what they could charge, what they could earn.
Central planning, basically.
Exactly. For someone like Rothbard, an Austrian school economist, this was just an abomination. Their whole philosophy is built on prices and wages emerging naturally from the market, from millions of individual decisions, not set by some government bureaucrat. It wasn't just bad policy in their eyes. It was a fundamental violation of capitalism.
And if that wasn't enough.
Right. The Nixon unilaterally closes the gold window.
Yeah.
Now, for listeners maybe not deep into monetary history, this essentially severed the last link between the U.S. dollar and gold, killed the gold standard, pushed the U.S. entirely onto fiat money.
Money backed by nothing but government decree.
Precisely. And for limited government folks, this was huge. They saw the gold standard as a crucial break, the check on the government's power to just print money endlessly, fund wars, grow bureaucracy.
Without consequence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was like giving the state a blank check. Unlimited power to inflate the currency, wage war, expand its reach.
So picture the feeling in 71. The Republicans, supposedly the party of fiscal restraint, suddenly doing wage controls, price controls, ditching gold. It looked like they were embracing the omnipotent state.
Just like the Democrats, in their view. So the LP was born from this deep need for, ideological purification. a rejection of a GOP they saw as corrupted, pragmatic, in the worst way.
And there were other things fueling it too, weren't there? It wasn't just economics.
Oh, definitely. While the Nixon shock was maybe the main philosophical trigger, you absolutely have to include the deep opposition to the Vietnam War still ongoing, undeclared. And crucially, the draft. Conscription.
Yeah, the draft really ties into their core ideas, doesn't it?
Directly. Because what is the draft? Fundamentally, it's the state claiming ownership of your body, your life, your labor, forcing you into service.
Violating individual sovereignty at its most basic level.
Exactly. So it all came together, this feeling that the entire political establishment, both parties, were willing to use state power aggressively, coercively, both at home with the economy and abroad through war and the draft. They felt they had to reject the whole thing. And it's important to stress, the LP wasn't founded on just vague anger. It was built on a pretty specific, rigorous philosophical base. It's kind of a blend, really.
A blend of what?
You've got the Austrian school of economics thinkers like Mises, Hazlitt, Rothbard, focusing on sound money, individual action, free markets. And then you have a revival of 19th century classical liberalism, which really put individual rights front and center.
And they wrote this down pretty quickly, right? The 72 platform?
Yeah, the Statement of Principles from their first platform in 1972. It's still kind of their foundational document. And it rests on three key pillars, three non-negotiables. First is individual sovereignty.
Meaning?
The absolute right of every single person to exercise sole dominion over their own life, their body, their property. You own yourself.
Okay. Pillar 1, self-ownership.
Right. And that leads straight into Pillar 2, which is probably the LP's most famous idea, the non-aggression principle, or the NAP.
The NAP. You hear that term a lot with libertarians. What is it, simply put?
Simply put, you cannot initiate force or the threat of force against another person or their justly acquired property. That's it. Your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins, basically. Your sovereignty is absolute until you aggress against someone else's.
Okay, so this isn't just a nice slogan. For the LP, this is like the operating system for everything else.
Well, that's a great way to put it, yeah. If you truly accept the NAP, they argue, then all their other policy positions just logically follow.
How so?
Well, think about the state. What is the state? Fundamentally, it's an organization with a monopoly on the legitimate use of force in a given territory. If you accept that, and you accept the NAP, no initiating force.
Then the state itself looks problematic.
Exactly. Its very nature is potentially in conflict with the NAP. So the third pillar follows directly. Opposition to the omnipotent state. It's a direct challenge to the idea that the government has some inherent right to dispose of the lives of individuals and the fruits of their labor using coercion.
Okay, so let's follow the logic. If the NAP is supreme, what about taxes?
Ah, right. If taxation is taking your property, the fruits of your labor, without your explicit individual consent,
then it's aggression. It violates the NAP.
That's the LP conclusion. Taxation is theft, essentially, under the NAP.
Wow. Okay. And the draft?
Same logic. Forcing someone into military service, seizing their body and labor, clear violation of the NAP. What about, say, economic regulations, zoning laws telling you what you can build on your land, occupational licenses stopping you from practicing a trade?
All aggression under this framework, interfering with your person or property.
Yep. So they conclude that the only economic system compatible with the NAP is pure laissez-faire capitalism, a system totally free from state interference.
Which leaves what role for government at all, if any?
Extremely narrow. The sole legitimate function of government, according to their 72 platform, is purely defensive. It's just about protecting individual rights, life, liberty, property from aggression, whether that aggression comes from criminals, force, fraud, or from the government itself, confiscation.
So police, courts, maybe national defense, and that's it.
Basically, yeah. Just the functions needed to stop people from violating the NAP against each other.
Yeah.
But here's where the cracks appear, right from the beginning.
Ah, the internal tension.
Exactly. Even if you agree on that super minimal role, there's still disagreement on whether even that minimal state is legitimate or if it should exist at all. The founding group itself is kind of an unstable mix.
This is the manarchist versus anarcho-capitalist thing, right? Let's clarify that, because it seems crucial to understanding their internal fights.
It is. So the manarchists think minimal state. They're people like John Hospers, their first presidential candidate. They basically accept the 72 platform definition. Government should exist, but only for police, courts, and defense. The night watchman state, basically.
Grink the state down to almost nothing, but keep those core protective functions.
Right. Limit the state drastically. But then you have the anarcho-capitalists, or ANCAPs, like Murray Rothbard was. They look at the anarchist position and say, hold on, that's a contradiction.
How so?
Well, taxation is theft, as the NP implies.
Mm-hmm.
How does even the minimal state fund itself? Needs taxes for police and courts, right?
Uh-huh.
So the ANCAPs argue the minimal state itself has to initiate force through taxation to exist. Therefore, even the minimal state violates the NP.
So their goal isn't limiting the state, it's
abolishing it entirely. They believe any state, because it claims a monopoly on force and funds itself coercively, is illegitimate. They envision a society where protection, dispute resolution, everything currently done by the state is provided by competing private companies and voluntary associations, funded by contracts, not taxes.
Wow. So instead of state courts, you'd have private arbitration companies you subscribe to?
Something like that. Private security forces instead of state police. It's a radical vision.
So limit versus abolish. That's the fundamental split.
And it's been there from day one. It's baked into the LP's DNA, this unresolved tension.
Yeah.
And it fuels so much of their internal conflict, even today.
Okay, so we have this foundation, self-ownership, the NFP, and this internal debate about how minimal the state should be or if it should exist at all. Now we can really see why merging with the Democrats or Republicans just isn't on the table for them. The gaps are huge. Let's start with the Democrats.
Yeah, the conflict there is really fundamental. It goes down to how you even define freedom. The LP, as we said, is all about negative liberty, freedom from interference, freedom from coercion, especially by the state.
Don't tread on me.
Basically. The Democratic platform, though, is largely built on positive liberty, the freedom to achieve things, freedom to have opportunity. And they believe achieving that often requires the state to step in, to ensure fairness, provide resources, regulate.
To level the playing field, as they might say.
Exactly. And that philosophical difference plays out instantly in economics. The LP platform, uncompromisingly laissez-faire. We're talking abolition of the income tax, abolish the IRS.
Because taxation is theft.
Right. They oppose all bailouts, subsidies, tariffs. They see it all as government picking winners and losers, or cronyism.
Whereas the Democrats see government action as necessary. Proactive government is good, in their view. They support regulations, worker safety, environmental protection, consumer rights. They see progressive taxation not as theft, but as the fair way to fund public goods and services.
The goals are just fundamentally opposed. Mutually exclusive, really.
But the snarkest divide, the one that really throws the difference into sharp relief, has got to be the social safety net, right? Social Security, Medicare.
Oh, absolutely. This is where there is zero common ground. The LP platform explicitly calls for the elimination or, at minimum, a rapid phasing out of both programs.
Why that back to the NAP?
Exactly. From their perspective, mandatory payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare, that's the state forcibly seizing the fruits of his labor without his consent to fund a program he might not want or need or could provide for himself. It's a massive violation of individual sovereignty and property rights, according to the NAP.
Whereas the Democrats, these programs are practically sacred ground for them, a critical lifeline.
Absolutely. Their platform is all about protecting and expanding Social Security and Medicare, usually funded by higher taxes on corporations or the wealthy. So you have one party dedicated to dismantling these cornerstone programs and the other dedicated to defending and growing them. There's just no overlap, no compromise possible there.
And we should probably tackle that common simplification that the LP is just socially liberal, because while they might end up on the same side of an issue sometimes, the reasons are totally different, aren't they?
Completely different foundations. Take drug legalization, a classic example. The LP supports full legalization, cannabis, heroin, everything. Why?
The NAP.
Right. It's not the government's business what consenting adults put into their own bodies as long as they don't harm others. Self-ownership. The state has no legitimate authority to act as a moral guardian or protect people from themselves.
Okay, but many Democrats might also support decriminalization or legalization, especially for marijuana. But their reasoning is different.
Generally, yes. Democratic arguments often stem from social justice concerns, ending discriminatory enforcement, addressing mass incarceration, racial disparities, or they frame it as a public health issue treatment instead of punishment, needing state resources. So they might want the state to intervene differently, perhaps provide treatment programs.
Whereas the LP wants the state out of it entirely.
Exactly. The LP rejects state intervention for social justice just as much as it rejects state intervention for traditional morality. The why is completely different, even if this what looks similar on the surface for some issues like, say, marriage equality, too. LP says government has no business in marriage at all. Democrats argue for equal protection under government recognition. Different paths entirely.
Okay, so the gap with the Democrats is pretty fundamental, rooted in positive versus negative liberty. What about the Republicans? They're often seen as closer, right?
Sure.
Small government, lower taxes.
That's the common view, but it masks massive, probably unbridgeable divides. It's less a philosophical chasm like with the Dems, and more like a family feud where core principles clash with ingrained political realities.
Right.
3 major conflict points stand out.
Number 1.
Social issues. This is probably the most obvious deal breaker for many voters. The LP, rooted in that strong individual sovereignty and NAP, it's fundamentally about cultural liberalism. Absolute tolerance for lifestyles, choices, as long as they're peaceful. They support full drug legalization, rights to self-expression, bodily autonomy, including things like end-of-life decisions.
Yeah, and the GOP, well, its modern base is heavily reliant on social conservatives and the religious right.
Exactly. And the data makes this clash incredibly clear. The sources point out, for example, something like 72% of self-identified libertarians favor physician-assisted suicide based on individual autonomy.
Okay.
But around 70% of white evangelicals, a core constituency of the GOP, oppose it, typically on religious or moral grounds. That one data point shows an unbridgeable divide, as one source puts it. You can't square that circle in one party platform.
Autonomy versus divinely inspired morality. Fundamentally different starting points. Okay, conflict number 2.
Foreign policy. This goes right back to the LP's founding moment, that anti-war, anti-draft sentiment from '71. It's not just a preference. It's an ironclad doctrine of non-interventionism.
What does that mean in practice?
It means ending all foreign military aid, ending economic aid, pulling out of international alliances like NATO, avoiding entangling alliances, as Washington warned, radically shrinking the military and intelligence apparatus. They see war and the military-industrial complex as the largest and most far-reaching of all statist enterprises. It's the ultimate tool for government growth, debt, and suppression of liberty.
And the Republican Party, especially post 9/11.
Defined by a generally hawkish interventionist foreign policy, they advocate for a powerful military, projecting strength globally, often acting as a global police force. They support alliances, foreign bases, intervention when U.S. interests are perceived to be at stake.
Yeah.
It's the polar opposite of the LP's non-interventionism. The GOP is committed to the very global military presence the RP was created to oppose.
Okay. Social issues, foreign policy. What's the third conflict? Isn't economics where they align?
That's the biggest myth. They sound similar sometimes, talking about free markets, but their actual approach is fundamentally different. The LP is truly laissez-faire,
Meaning
they oppose all government interference in the economy, period. Even interventions that might help certain businesses.
Right.
They hate subsidies, bailouts, protective tariffs, corporate welfare. They see it all as cronyism, government distorting the market.
Okay, where's the GOP?
The GOP is generally pro-business, not pure laissez-faire. They're often quite willing to support interventions they see as helping American businesses or the national economy. Think about agricultural subsidies, tariffs to protect specific industries, massive bailouts for banks or auto companies.
Things the LP would absolutely condemn as government interference.
Exactly. The LP calls it crony capitalism or even economic fascism. Plus, the huge military spending championed by the GOP is, in itself, a massive government expenditure that violates the LP's core fiscal principles of drastically shrinking the state.
So even on economics, it's laissez-faire purity versus pragmatic, pro-business interventionism.
Right. So summing it up, the LP can't adopt the GOP's social conservatism without alienating its liberal-leaning members. It can't adopt the GOP's interventionist foreign policy or its pro-business economics without completely abandoning its founding principles of non-aggression and genuinely limited government. There's just no viable path to fusion there either.
Okay, so we've painted a picture of a party with a very distinct, very rigid philosophy, one that just doesn't fit neatly with either major party, which brings us back to the core puzzle. If they're so principled, why can't they win anything significant? And the answer, the sources strongly suggest, isn't really about the popularity of their ideas. It's about the system itself.
Yeah, the electoral results are pretty stark, aren't they? After 50-plus years, the national picture is bleak for them. They've had little blips, sure. Like in 1972, the Hospers Nathan ticket got one single electoral vote.
Right, the faithless elector from Virginia. Toni Nathan, first woman to get an electoral vote. A great trivia question, but...
Politically meaningless, yeah. Their absolute peak, their electoral high point, was 2016. Gary Johnson and William Weld.
Former governors, relatively mainstream for the LP.
Right. They pulled in almost 4.5 million votes, which sounds like a lot, but it was only 3.3% of the popular vote. And that was clearly a protest vote year, with Trump and Clinton being so unpopular.
A temporary spike.
Exactly. Because by 2020, their vote share got chopped by more than half, back down to 1.2%. And the current status, the bottom line, 0 libertarians in the U.S. Senate, 0 in the House of Representatives, 0 state governors. It's not just difficulty winning, it's systemic failure at the national level.
And the main culprit, according to political science, is the way we vote in the U.S. It's not proportional representation, is it?
No, not at all. In many European countries, if a party gets, say, 10% of the national vote, they get roughly 10% of the seats in the legislature. Proportional. Here we use winner-take-all voting in single-member districts, sometimes called first-past-the-post or FPTP.
One person represents each district, and whoever gets the most votes wins, even if most is only like 35%.
Precisely. And this system is subject to a very powerful effect, almost a law of political science. Duverger's law.
Okay, Duverger's law. Break that down for us.
Maurice Duverger, a French political scientist, basically observed that winner-take-all systems like the U.S. has strongly push towards a two-party system. It creates this kind of double whammy, a trap for third parties. There's a mechanical effect and a psychological effect.
Let's start with the mechanics, the math of it.
Okay, the mechanical effect. In our system, only one candidate wins per district. So imagine the Libertarian Party does really well. They run a candidate in every single congressional district, and they get a solid 25% of the vote everywhere. A really strong showing, right?
Yeah, 25% consistently across the country sounds huge.
But if, in every district, the Republican gets 40% and the Democrat gets 35%, who wins the seat?
The Republican with 40%.
Right. So the Libertarian, despite getting a quarter of the votes everywhere, wins. 0 seats. 0 representation in Congress.
Wow. So your votes are effectively wasted unless you can actually get more votes than anyone else in at least one specific place.
Exactly. Widespread support doesn't translate into seats. You need concentrated support to win a plurality somewhere. And the sources give a great real-world comparison here.
Oh, yeah.
The Libertarian Party of Costa Rica. They operate under a proportional representation system. In their very first election, they won the equivalent of 9 seats in the U.S. Congress.
9 seats first try.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the U.S. Libertarian Party, after 50 years, with way more money and name recognition, 0 national legislative seats. It really highlights how much the structure is the barrier, not just the ideas.
Okay, that's the mechanical reason they can't win seats. What's the psychological effect?
This is about voter behavior.
Yeah.
The psychological effect is basically strategic voting.
Meaning voters don't just vote for who they like best.
Not always. Rational voters look at the system, they see the polls, they understand that under winner-take-all, the Libertarian candidate probably has no real chance of winning. So they feel their vote would be wasted if they vote Libertarian.
So instead they vote for
one of the 2 major party candidates who can win. Usually the one they dislike slightly less. The lesser of 2 evils.
And this leads to the whole spoiler effect accusation.
Yes, exactly. This is the constant attack on the LP. You're just spoiling it for the Republicans or occasionally the Democrats. The fear is that by voting Libertarian, you're actually helping the major party candidate you despise the most get elected by taking votes away from the slightly less bad option.
And since the LP often pulls more from the GOP side, at least on economic issues.
Right. That pressure usually pushes Libertarian-leaning voters back towards the Republican candidate purely strategically to prevent a Democrat from winning. It reinforces the two-party dominance.
And the system doesn't just rely on Duverger's law. It actively makes it harder for third parties, doesn't it? Like getting on the ballot.
Oh, absolutely. Ballot access laws are a huge, often deliberately difficult institutional hurdle. Well, Democrats and Republicans are usually automatically on the ballot everywhere. But a minor party, like the LP, they have to fight tooth and nail, state by state, often collecting thousands upon thousands of signatures, meeting really strict deadlines, spending huge amounts of money and volunteer time just to get their candidate's name listed so people can vote for them.
And these laws are written by?
State legislatures dominated by Democrats and Republicans. Funny how that works, eh?
Yeah. Are the requirements really that bad?
Some are astronomical. The sources mention Georgia, for instance. To get on the ballot for a district race, you need signatures from 5% of all registered voters in that district. That's incredibly difficult and expensive logistically for a smaller party.
Wow, 5%.
Or Alabama. A minor party needs to get 20% of the vote in a statewide race just to get automatic ballot access for the next election cycle. 20%.
It's a threshold practically designed to be impossible, ensuring they have to repeat the costly signature gathering process over and over. It drains resources that could be used for campaigning.
So the structure locks them out mathematically, psychologically, and administratively.
And then there's the final piece, media exclusion. Because the media knows they can't really win under this system, they mostly ignore the LP. Or, if they do cover them, it's usually framed entirely around that spoiler narrative.
Which just reinforces the psychological effect that a vote for them is wasted.
Exactly. It's a self-reinforcing cycle, locking them out of mainstream visibility and consideration.
Okay, so we've got this picture. A party with rigid principles, facing massive structural barriers designed essentially to ensure it fails electorally at the national level. Which brings us right back to that original question. Why bother? Why keep going for 50 years if winning national office is basically impossible? Why not just, become a think tank or a lobbying group?
Right. And the answer seems to be that for the core of the party, winning elections isn't actually the primary goal. Their measure of success is different. The sources describe the LP's main function as serving as an ideological church.
An ideological church, meaning?
Meaning, it's a place for true believers. Its purpose is to uphold the faith, the pure doctrine of libertarianism, against what they see as the corruption and compromise of the two major parties. Success is measured by ideological purity, not by political power.
Their slogan is literally the party of principle, isn't it?
Exactly. It provides an ideological home for people who find both Democrats and Republicans philosophically unacceptable. For these voters, casting a ballot for the LP isn't about trying to pick the winner. It's a protest vote.
Sending a message.
An unambiguous ideological message. They're saying, I reject the premises of both major parties. There's almost a pride in being too principled to win. That purity is the point for many members. They see themselves as the only ones truly standing against the cult of the omnipotent state, as they might put it.
But does that mean they have no impact at all? Just preaching to the choir?
Not necessarily zero impact. While they don't win nationally, third parties often play this role of ideological incubator. They raise issues, sometimes radical ones, that the major parties ignore. Well, think about drug decriminalization or legalization. The LP was talking about that decades ago. Non-interventionist foreign policy, auditing the Federal Reserve. These ideas were way outside the mainstream, but the LP kept them alive in political discourse.
And sometimes those ideas eventually get picked up.
Exactly. It's called policy poaching or co-option. Mainstream politicians, often Republicans looking for primary votes or trying to appeal to a certain segment, will sometimes adopt watered-down versions of libertarian ideas.
Ron Paul is the classic example, right? He ran as a Republican, but brought a lot of those LP-style ideas, non-intervention, sound money, to a much bigger audience.
Precisely. He showed how the ideas could gain traction. But significantly, he did it within the Republican Party structure, not outside it, which kind of proves the point about the structural barriers.
And what about winning any elections? Do they have any success anywhere?
Yes, at the very local level. Remember Duverger's law. It's strongest at the national and state levels, down the city council, school board, water district level. The dynamics can be different. Less polarization, maybe name recognition matters more.
So they do win some of those.
They do. The party claims around, I think the number was 148 elected officials currently in these kinds of low-level, often nonpartisan or less partisan local posts. They're small victories, but important for morale, for proving they can function as a political entity somewhere.
But even with that, the party seems constantly plagued by internal fights, doesn't it? That principled nature seems to lead to a lot of infighting.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost inherent in a party built on radical individualism. Sectarian conflict is endemic, as one source put it. They're constantly arguing amongst themselves about ideological purity, strategy, messaging.
And this brings us back to that original split, doesn't it? The monarchists versus the anarcho-capitalists. Is that still playing out?
Very much so. That fundamental tension from 1971 is basically being relitigated right now through modern factions within the party.
Who are the main factions today?
You've basically got on one side what some call the old guard. These are often folks associated with that more pragmatic 2016 Johnson-Weld ticket. They tend to represent the minarchist wing. They want to broaden the party's appeal, maybe soften some of the rhetoric, make small compromises to try and become more electorally viable, win something.
Okay, the pragmatists and the other side.
The other side is the Mises Caucus, MC, named after Ludwig von Mises, the Austrian economist. They represent the more hardcore, purist, anarcho-capitalist wing. They staged a pretty successful takeover of the party leadership and platform at the LP's national convention in 2022.
A takeover. What was their goal?
Explicitly prioritizing ideological purity and radical messaging over any attempt at broad electoral appeal or compromise. They want the party to be uncompromisingly anarcho-capitalist, or at least radically minarchist in its public stance. No apologies, no watering down the message.
And what's been the result of the Mises Caucus taking control?
Well, the sources report things like falling membership numbers, declining donations, and perhaps most tellingly, you've seen some MC-aligned leaders and influencers openly supporting or praising non-libertarian candidates, like Donald Trump or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., if they feel those candidates align better on a specific issue, like maybe anti-war sentiment or skepticism of institutions.
Wow. So prioritizing a specific principle, even if embodied by someone outside the party, over party loyalty itself.
It seems so. It really highlights that internal tension. Is the party vehicle the most important thing, or the pure ideological message paramount, regardless of who delivers it? For the purity faction, the message seems to trump the party structure itself. #tag outro.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this all up. What does it all mean? We have this party, the Libertarian Party, defined by these two core non-negotiable ideas, the non-aggression principle and non-interventionism.
Right. And those very principles make it ideologically impossible for them to truly align with the Democrats, who are fundamentally about positive liberty and government intervention for social goals.
Or with the Republicans, who rely on social conservatism and embrace an interventionist foreign policy and often pro-business rather than pure laissez-faire economics. They just don't fit.
And then you layer on the structure of the American political system. Duverger's law, winner-take-all voting, those incredibly high ballot access hurdles. It all works together to make national electoral success almost impossible for any third party, but especially one as ideologically distinct as the LP.
So their failure to win isn't necessarily a sign their ideas are unpopular or they're bad campaigners. It's almost a feature of the system, not a bug. The system is designed to produce two major parties.
Exactly. The LP's electoral failure is, in many ways, structurally guaranteed.
And yet they persist. They endure because, as you said, they fill that ideological vacuum. They're the church for radical individualists who feel abandoned by the mainstream. Which leads us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to maybe chew on.
Think about this. The LP has spent its entire existence fighting these external barriers. The electoral system, ballot access laws. But what if, hypothetically, those barriers vanish tomorrow? Imagine we switch to proportional representation, easy ballot access.
Would the Libertarian Party suddenly become a major political force?
Or would that endemic internal conflict, that original sin from 1971, the fight between the monarchists who want to limit the state and the anarcho-capitalists who want to abolish it entirely, simply take over? Would their own internal identity crisis become the new, perhaps insurmountable barrier to ever actually governing or achieving widespread political success?
They might find that even if the system let them compete, their own principles make internal unity and maybe political victory impossible anyway. Something to think about.